all of that stuff. So this is the fourth week we've been talking about the unity principles, and it's interesting this week that it lines up exactly with the daily word, and I just loved that guidance. God's wisdom, love, and understanding are written on my heart. And the principle this week is that when we go into prayer and meditation, it's when we can increase our connection to God. That's when we increase our wisdom, our understanding, our discernment. It's how we do that. The first principle talked about that there is one unseen force in the universe, and we sometimes call that God. Sometimes we just call it the divine, the unseen. This force is present everywhere, this energy. Each of us has a direct connection to that. It is our essence. We are pure and whole. And we were not, as you might have been told, born in sin. That is not a part of our essence or who we are. And last week we talked about creating our life experiences through our way of thinking, that our thoughts create a lot, don't they? For one thing, they create that is how I feel at the moment. What I'm thinking is how I'm going to feel at this moment. If my thoughts are negative, how in the world am I going to feel good in this present moment? And we believe too that the more positive our thoughts, the more we allow our imagination, all that creative principle to come in and take place to create the life that we do want. And so this week we're talking about the power of meditation and affirmative prayer, going into that stillness. That was a beautiful song. In the stillness, in the silence, in the silence. How can we even know who we are if we don't go into the silence enough? Some of us have a practice of meditation every day. Most of us do, I think. It's what has brought us to unity. You may not even call that meditation what you do. I call my time my quiet time. Jesus went out into the wilderness to be alone. Why? So that he could hear the voice of the one speaking to him and through him. It's why he went into the quiet. One of the reasons we do it too is that when that becomes a practice, just like any practice, we become better and better at it, don't we? The more you silence that negative voice, and the more you go into the quiet, the more you can hear the voice of God speaking to you and moving through you. So through this principle, prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. And another way to say it is there is power in affirmative prayer, which we believe increases our awareness of God. These are essential elements of the spiritual life because they keep us awake and aware. How many of you have a practice every day of whatever, if you may call it prayer, quiet time, meditation? How many? Yes. Yes. Certainly. And as we do it more and more, we find we're able to go to that place easier, right? So that even if you're in the midst of a crowd and something is troubling you, you find it easier at that moment to go within and find that place, that centered place of balance and stillness, where you find God, and all is well. When I see something that is extremely troubling, like this family that I was speaking about this week, it is so hard. It is hard to separate yourself, your heart, from that, because they're hurting. They're experiencing pain and loss, and the anticipation of that loss. And many of you have gone through that. And to separate yourself from it is not easy, but what I do after I leave a person's room, and I've been with them and I've prayed with them, in order to go back out into the world and do my job and the person that I need to be, I can't stay in that place of worry and concern and anxiety. So what I do is take a moment to pray and to replenish my own well, because that's how we serve the world. We can't stay in that anxiety and loss. We must go on and be strong and be joyful to share that with others. And what we finally decide is that no matter that looks like is tremendous pain and loss, we know that because it is happening for some unknown reason that our human eyes cannot see, it is for the highest good. There is a highest good being served here, and we just can't see it with our human eyes. And a few years later, we may be able to go back and say, yes, I see that had this not happened, this person would not have been affected that way, and they would not have become the person they were meant to be, too. So we accept whatever is going on in the world. Sometimes it's painful, and with our human eyes we cannot understand, but we know a higher good is being served. So this morning, as I said, we go to our well to be replenished. Why do we do that? And that's part of what's happening when we're in the quiet and prayer and meditation. I like to imagine a well, and around that well are several buckets that have been filled. And as I take one and I give it out over here, and another, and I give it out over here, and maybe over here, and over here, my supply is being diminished, isn't it? And so for me, going back to prayer and meditation and the stillness, I'm filling my well, so that I may also continue giving to others in the way that I should. Now, if you're going through a very, very painful process, this filling your well may take some time. And you need to honor that, and honor that it may take more time to fill your well than it would normally. So let's continue to do that. So back to this principle, we have been talking about these as they've been described in this wonderful little booklet by Reverend Ellen Davenport. And she has created the most easy to understand little book about the 5 guiding principles for unity. Now, these are pretty simple the way we've stated them, and of course they don't cover everything, but we have found that they cover the higher points, and within them are the other points. Like we know that surrender, for instance, there's a lot of surrender that goes into a lot of this, like accepting there is one power and one presence, accepting that lives in us, accepting that our thoughts create our reality. In doing that, we understand there's a lot of surrender of letting go of some older ideas we had, right? We had to surrender some of those other things we learned in life through whatever happened with us. Most of us did not live in a household like Frank did, where he had parents who were very far-seeing, and he went to Unity Church at a young age. And we know our parents did the best they could to teach us what they thought was best. And for most of us in my generation, that was just how to make it in the world economically. And my dad's advice was work hard and save your money. And you know what? As it turns out, that's pretty darn good advice. And in my generation, most of us heeded that. But there was a lot that was left out. And I always had this yearning all of my life, and all this knowing there's a powerful presence in there. There's this wonderful, loving God out there that I want to know, and I want to be a part of that world. That's what I want, and that's what I've claimed. And so while I'm very, very glad for the teachings that we had when we were young, we've needed to surrender a lot of those, haven't we? We needed to surrender a lot of that and to understand that we do create a lot of our experiences just the way we think. And so the best way to heal is to spend enough time in the quiet. In the quiet, I can hear the voice of God. I cannot hear that if there's a lot of chaos going on. So I need to step aside for a moment. And sometimes it's just as easy as closing your eyes and becoming centered. And if you're in a crowd of people, you might say, I need to think about that. I'll get back to you. Sometimes that's the wisest thing you can say. If you're placed on point and feel like you need to give an answer, you don't. You need to remember that. I'll get back to you on that. Thank you for asking. I'll get back. And from today's daily word, through my prayer and meditation practice, I open to the spiritual law at work in my life. My understanding grows in harmony with this law, and my discernment leads me to make sound decisions in every area of my life. Reverend Ellen in the book says, prayer moves us into a state of allowing and non-resistance. We don't receive an answer to prayer as much as we allow the answer into our lives. It's like opening the shades to let the sunshine stream in. The sunlight was always there, but we were blocking it. There is not a God of watching and deciding whether we deserve good outcomes. There is a good in the universe, and we align ourselves with it. We align ourselves with that. So from that place, I feel my prayer first so that my heart and mind are connected. with the divine. From that place, I feel. If it's divine order in a chaotic situation, I feel that. If it's feeling for another, I imagine myself go into their body, usually their heart space. And from that place, I feel healing taking place right there. That's in my prayer and my meditation. So I feel that. I feel the prayer. I pray for the healing that is highest good for all concerned. So feeling is the prayer. We align our heart and our mind. We go into the stillness, into the quiet, and we feel the best taking place. This week I ran across a term that I've seen many times and thought about. And I've written the article in the newsletter about thin places. A thin place is a term that's been used for centuries to describe a place or location where the space between heaven and earth grows thin and the secular and the sacred seem to meet. Has anyone ever found a thin place where you feel like you're touching the face of God, yet you're still here in this body? The term comes from the mystical world of Celtic spirituality. They were deeply connected to the natural world and considered every aspect of life to be filled with the presence of the divine, even the ordinary elements of everyday life. And I believe we can expand that beyond the borders of Ireland and Scotland and say that we've all experienced thin places in our lives. Those mystical, unexplainable touches with the divine. Franciscan Richard Rohr calls this place the edge and suggests we should cultivate being there. He says the edge is a holy place, thin place, and you've been taught how to live there, to take your position on the spiritual edge of things is to learn how to move safely in and out, back and forth, across and return. So perhaps for some of you, imagining yourself to be on the sand and the sound of the waves and the gulls brings you closer to that thin place. Perhaps sitting on your prayer cushion in your meditation corner serves you well. Perhaps you're able to touch that thin place while washing dishes, as Brother Lawrence did. He explained that in his little book, Practicing the Presence of God. And the most effective way Brother Lawrence had for communicating with God was to simply do his ordinary work. He did that obediently, out of a pure love of God, purifying it as much as was humanly possible. He thought it was a mistake to think of our prayer time as being different than any other, that we should stay in the presence of God. So for my purposes, I like to think of a thin place or being on the edge as my ability to go within no matter where I physically might be. In the silence, I find my connection that flows from my heart throughout my body and into the ethers. With that healing, loving, gentle presence, I find God. From that place, I have pierced the veil between this world and the beyond. And in meditation and stillness is where I'm able to do that. So silence is not merely the absence of internal and external noise. within the stillness arises our awareness of the presence of the divine. We can feel that presence in an empty cathedral. And I know many of you, like me, you can go into a cathedral or a church where people have prayed over the centuries. You can feel it as you walk in. You can feel the divine presence. People say they feel that when they come here. That makes me feel good. I'm glad of that because we've certainly prayed a lot here in the sacred place. You might stand on a mountain, forest, or any place where we might find and embrace the divine. I've also mixed in another little story the last few weeks, and that's the story of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And that's a spiritual journey, as you know. That's an entire spiritual journey in that little story. And I just love it. So Glenda told Dorothy near the end of the story, she said, "You've always had the power. You just didn't know." So I'm telling you, you've always had the power. Maybe you just didn't know. I hope you do now. I hope you remember that there's a light within. I hope you remember that you may connect with that light, that energy, that love. You may align your heart and your mind, your entire being, with that power at any time. I hope you'll remember to keep your thoughts positive. And I hope you'll remember to replenish your well. Go often. You do that by going often within to the silence. So what is this power exactly? It's your life energy, your spirit, the core of who you are. It's where your brain and your heart meet and align with Christ's energy that's available any place, any time. So to find that center, you need to be still. You can shut your eyes and focus. And if you have those red shoes, you can click your heels. Notice Diane has red shoes on this morning. She can click her heels. It can be found by sitting quietly, meditating, experiencing the stillness, where you will find the inner wisdom that you need to make it through any situation, whatever it is. David said many years ago in Psalm 23:2, "He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul." I hope that your week will be one that is not too busy, and that you will find much time to restore your soul in the quiet, in the peace. And as always, I thank you for your time.